Good morning. Good morning. We're looking. There we go. Hey, we're starting a new series where we're looking at David, King David from the Old Testament, who is a remarkable man who's had a remarkable life, a life that's been so remarkable that we could actually describe him by a whole bunch of different titles. We can describe him as David, the humble shepherd, David, the giant slayer, David, the gifted poet, David, the mighty warrior, David, the home wrecker, David, the wife stealer, David, the passionate worshiper, David, the legendary king. And as crazy as a business card as that would be, those would actually all be true. Conflicting, yes. Contradictory and hard to reconcile, absolutely, but true. Because David, like us, was a lot of things. His story has these sweeping scenes of faith and failure like ours do. And in David, you see these pillars of, these virtues like stone pillars rise up out of the fog of our humanity of like courage and loyalty and faith. And yet we also see that in David, that in the fog of his humanity also runs some pretty dark stuff of selfishness and lust. You see, the story of David is a complicated one. It's a story of faith and flaws and destiny and how those three things all combine to make a remarkable life. Now, in many ways, David and his incredible story is shaped by the time that he lived in. He lived around the 11th century BC, and that period is chronicled in the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, where for the next 9 weeks we're going to be in those books. Now, before I can begin to kind of tell you about David, we need to kind of back up the story, and I need to tell you about what the world was like when David breaks into the scene, what was going on, what was happening, because those events are absolutely crucial to understand him and his remarkable life. And in some ways, the scene that David breaks into, that world that he steps on into, is not all that unlike our world today. You see, we live in a culture where personal freedoms sits right at like the top of our cultural values. Right? You're not the boss of me. You don't tell me what to do. I march to my own drummer. What gives you the right to tell me what's right or wrong? I'll decide for myself what is right. Thank you very much. That's the world that we live in. And it might surprise you that that was also the world of 1 Samuel. That was also the world that David lived in. Now, as you move to the biblical narrative, before 1 Samuel is the book of Judges. And Judges chronicles the time just before 1 Samuel picks up. And in the book of Judges, if you've read it, you know there is a single phrase that kind of summarizes the ethos of the culture of that time. And the phrase is this: in that day, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Which is not a compliment. It's not them saying like everybody was working really hard, they were trying to do what is right, because the author of Judges contrasts them doing what is right in their eyes with what was right in God's eyes. And those two things are totally, completely different. And so the book has this phrase over and over again. The people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, over and over and over again. It's a picture of wholesale rebellion and rejection of God and his way of life. And so when you read the book of Judges, and you read 1st and 2nd Samuel, not surprisingly, if this is true, you're going to read some really, really dark, nasty stuff that you can't believe was in there. Stuff that you never heard about in Sunday school. Stuff that would give HBO a field day if they could make a miniseries on it. Because there is a brutality and a violence and a depravity that is just mind-blowing in that time. Because it was a time of absolute moral chaos. And so the writer of Judges, after he chronicles this whole period, he ends with this phrase. This is how he ends the book. In those days, Israel had no king. And everyone just did what was right in their own eyes. Now, of course, that didn't mean that Israel was without leadership. For many years, they had great leaders. People like Joshua and Gideon. People who united the people and led them into God's way and brought them closer to God and saw the blessing that was promised by God manifested in their time. But they also, as a people, experienced these long periods where they completely disregarded the commands of God. And so when you read the book of Judges, if you do, you see there's this maddening cycle that happens in the book. It's just chapter after chapter, the same storyline. It goes like this. Everybody does what is right in their own eyes, and things go bad. And things go bad usually takes the form of, other tribes or other nations invading and slaughtering men, women, and children. And the people cry out to God in desperation, and God sends a judge, a man or a woman, who comes and is meant to lead the people back to God. And the people repent, they follow the judge, and then the danger passes, and the blessing's restored, and then guess what happens? Everybody does what is right in their own eyes again. And the whole thing starts over and over again. Now the last judge is a man named Samuel. And Samuel is really important to our story. His storyline is going to weave into David's. And Samuel is a powerful man who feared God. But when our story picks up, Samuel is getting old. He knows that the writing is on the wall. He knows that he won't be judged forever. And so he decides to appoint his sons to take over for him. And his sons are named Eric and Donald Jr. Wait a second. That doesn't sound right. His sons are named Joel and Abijah. And so he appoints his sons to take over, but there's a problem. And the problem is this, that unfortunately character and integrity are not hereditary. And his sons are nothing like their dad. And they use their position and their power to line their pockets, and they're corrupt and they're wicked, and they only have one goal, and that is personal gain. And so the elders of the tribes of Israel, they come to Samuel and they have this confrontation with him, and they say these words. They say, Samuel, you are old. It's always a good way to start a negotiation. You are so old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. Now from the elders' perspective, this seems like a reasonable proposal. A king seems to be working for the nations around us because they keep kicking the tar out of us all the time. So why don't we get a strong leader who can unite all these 12 fractious tribes and bring them all together? Now, you probably don't see this at first breath, but this plan is breathtaking in its stupidity. Well, for a couple of reasons. First, it's just the logic of the whole thing. The logic goes like this. Samuel, you are a great leader, but you're old. And you appointed your sons to follow you, and they're shysters. So set up a system where we have a king who will perpetually appoint his sons to be our next ruler. Right? That's what a monarchy is. Monarchies bring some degree of stability because the leadership question is answered. Everybody knows that when the king dies, his oldest son will take over, and when he dies, his oldest son will take over, and so on. And so they're saying that the system isn't working, so entrench the system. I mean, it's remarkably foolish. Because monarchies, while they can bring some stability, and historically they have from time to time, they have one great flaw, and it's this: that even the best leaders can have terrible sons. And if you look through history, it is rare when you have a great leader who is followed by an even greater leader as a son. More often than not, when leadership is a birthright, when it's an entitlement, you more often not get this guy. This is who you get. Right? And it's like bad for everybody. Right? That's what happens when you entrench power in the sons. And so the elders say, the other nations are doing it, we demand a king. Now Samuel's ticked off at this, and he goes back to God, and he speaks with God, and God says, Samuel, this is not an indictment on you. This is an indictment on me. In fact, this is what God says word for word. He says this: listen to all that the people are saying to you. Because it's not you they've rejected, but they have rejected me as their king. There is a breathtaking faithlessness in this demand for a king. Because Israel was not supposed to be like any other nation. Their security, their peace never came from a structure, an organization, from a plan, or from a man. They didn't need a structure in order to be safe and secure. They just needed to walk with God. Israel was God's people. And when he established a covenant with them, he made this declaration and this promise to them. He said this in Exodus 6, I will take you as my people. Of all the nations of the earth, I will take you. And I will be your God. You see, there was a special relationship between God and Israel that was different from every other nation and every other tribe on the earth. He was with them. He would protect them. He would provide for them. He would lead them and guide them. He would be their security. They were in turn called to walk with God, to walk in His ways, to trust Him. And as such, they were supposed to be a holy nation. They were supposed to be set apart and different from the other nations. And as such, they were like a light to the nations. That everybody else who was doing it humanity's way, who was stumbling and bumbling, could look at Israel and say, these people walk with God, they know God, and they would be drawn to them and find God for themselves. And so when they come and they say, we want a king just like the other nations, you need to see, it was a complete overturning of everything that they were. It was a complete betrayal of their identity and the God who gave them their identity. So instead of their behavior being governed by God and His Word, now their behavior is being governed by what other people are doing. They're supposed to be distinct and holy, but instead they're conforming to the nations around them. They're supposed to be a light that was an example for other nations to follow, but instead they are following the example of other nations. Pause here in our narrative. Because sometimes we can read these stories and we read them from 3,000 years of history and we dust them off and we blow up the dust and we talk about how old and primitive they were in their thinking. But man, Israel's temptation is our temptation. Because Peter is going to say to you and I, he's going to have the same historical descriptors of Israel and he's going to apply those to us and he's going to say this. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness and into His glorious light. Intrinsic to the Christian faith is this idea that as Christ followers, our lives are increasingly meant to conform to Jesus. That means over time you're supposed to more and more begin to look like Jesus. Your life is to kind of take His shape, His priorities, His values, His attributes. And as such, your life is meant to be increasingly in stark contrast to the world around us that does not know Jesus. Hence the image of darkness and light is supposed to be obvious. And I ask you and I ask me, is it? Is it? If they put a hidden camera in my house for a month, they put a hidden camera in my neighbor's house for a month, my neighbor who has 2.5 kids and loves his wife and works his job just like I do, right? If we left the exact same thing, would you see any stark contrast in our lives? When hardship comes, would there be a different level of peace and trust? When there's friction between, me and my wife, would you see that me loving her like Christ loves the church instead of being angry? Would you see me take that initiative and humble myself? Would you see compassion at a different level where there are needs? Would you see that we're using our money and our resources in a different way than other people are? Would there be a difference in my life? Would there be a difference in yours? This is the question that Israel was wrestling with, and it's a question that we need to wrestle with as well. Knowing that we are a people who are set apart, that means we are people who are adored by God. That means that our lives are more and more meant to come out of the darkness into light so that people can see it and our lives become this anthem of praise to the goodness of our God who would reach into the darkness and rescue us. That's what our lives are supposed to look like. And Israel succumbed to the same temptation that you and I experience, and that's that allure to imitate Everything else that we see that seems so much more important and so much better than the identity that God has called us to. And when we do that, when we step into an identity and we pursue values that are different than the way of Jesus, we step out of our identity and we drift further and further from Christ. And so we dare not read this demand for a king smugly, because it's the same temptation that we wrestle with. Well, God says to Samuel, okay, give them what they want, but warn them. Warn them of how this is going to go. In fact, he says these words exactly. And see if you pick up on a theme here. This is what the king who will reign over you will do. He will take your sons. He will take your daughters. He will take the best of your fields and your vineyards and your olive groves. He will take a tenth of your grain. He will take a tenth of your flocks. And you will become his slaves. You want to try to find safety and security in something lesser than me? It will end in your slavery. You see, any other system that is less than God, we just become a commodity to the system. And that devalues and dehumanizes us. And that is the story that is playing out in our culture over and over again. God warns them, he will no longer be my treasured possession. But they don't care. They say, give us a king just like the other nations. And God gives them what they ask for. And this leads us to the next character in our story. And it's a man named Saul. Now, Saul is anointed by Samuel to be the first king of Israel. And at first, it looks like everything is going great. It looks like they made a great choice because he checks off all the boxes that you would want in a king. If you lined up all of Israel, they're kind of like this, their heads, and then Saul is like this. Like he was imposing, he's this imposing, big figure, like your lead pastor, right? He just looks like so mean. He looks like a guy, that guy just looks like he can get things done. You want to follow him, right? He's just big and ripped and brave. And so he checks off all those boxes. And not only that, he's really humble. In fact, there's this funny story that when Samuel goes to present Saul to the people as their king, Saul is overwhelmed by the job, and he's hiding out among the baggage, and they have to go find him and pull him out. And they pull him out in front of Israel, and he's all disheveled, and he's got straw in his hair, and they're like, here's your king, right? Like he's a man who feels overwhelmed by the magnitude and responsibility and authority of the job, which seems like a good, hard position to start if you're going to be king. And so his first 100 days are a smashing success. Right? There's all kinds of good stuff getting done. He's able to rally the nation against their enemies. And remember, at this time, Israel was not a nation. They were a collection of tribes. And so he calls all the tribes together. He unites them like they hadn't been united in generations. And he leads them out an army of over 300,000. They defeat their enemy. Man, he's a get things done, unite the people. He is the leader they wanted. And it looks at this point that this is going to be one of those stories, one of those historical stories of, a person who opportunity came at just the right time and they had just the right ability to really, really bless and change things around them. It looks like one of those great stories. This guy who just, came out of nowhere and he was handed this opportunity and he ran with the ball. And interestingly, I think most of us think, sorry, I'm wandering out of this field of camera. I think most of us think that our life, our stories would get better if we just had those two things, more ability and more opportunity. And Saul has them both in spades. But he's missing one critical thing. One critical piece that if it's missing from your story, it'll be squandered potential. And that's integrity. Saul and his character is deeply flawed. He has some deep, deep flaws that begin to manifest themselves in his life and in his leadership like they always do in our lives. Saul is dishonest. He refuses to acknowledge his mistakes. He always scapegoats and passes the buck and blames other people. He demonstrates this fickle insecurity that requires him to be the center of attention, the center of praise. He's got this narcissistic tendency. I know there's no relevance to leadership today and anywhere in our culture, but try to use your imagination to imagine a leader on a global scale like that. And this is Saul. And his character defects just keep coming out more and more pronounced. And they continue to derail his leadership until the day comes where he blatantly disobeys God. And the story goes like this. Samuel tells Saul, Saul, I want you to go down to Gilgal, and I want you to wait there for 7 days and don't do anything. Now, whenever in the Bible, if you're a good Jew and you hear 7 days, a period of 7 days, that should take your mind back to a story that was also about 7 days. And you should realize maybe there's something going on here from that story and this story. So he says, I want you to go down to Gilgal. I want you to wait 7 days. I will come. I will offer a sacrifice. Don't do anything until I get there. So Saul goes. He brings his army. They go to Gilgal. They start sitting. Day 1 goes by. Day 2 goes by. The Philistines show up with their army, their mortal enemy. And as they're waiting, their army keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And Saul's like, oh man, this is looking bad. This is looking bad. And he's waiting and waiting, and his people are getting freaked out because they're outnumbered, and they're afraid of this army. And day 7 dawns, and Samuel's not there, and the people start deserting. His army runs, they throw down their weapons, they go hide in caves, and they climb into wells. They're so afraid of the Philistines that everything is going bad. And Saul is like, what do I do? What do I do? It's like, all eyes are on Saul. You're the leader. You need the one to get something done. You're the one who's been anointed by God to lead us. So Saul takes matters into his own hands, and he goes and he offers the sacrifice that Samuel said he would do. And at the end of offering the sacrifice, Samuel walks up and says this, what have you done? And Saul sputters out an excuse. I had no choice. The people were fleeing. It was going bad. Somebody needed to act. I obeyed almost everything of what you said, right? Except for I just did the sacrifice. I mean, we're splitting hairs here. Okay? We're like, the Spirit was there. No. Samuel says this, you have acted foolishly. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom forever. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people because you have not kept the Lord's commands. Saul, you will not have a dynasty. This monarchy will not get passed on to your sons. It ends with you. Your reign ends with you. Because you have shown the content of your heart. You have shown the content of your character. You have shown your values. You have shown your trust in me. And it's been found wanting. And if I just pause right here, and as I've been reading the story and rereading the story, I got to tell you that at this point, I find Saul's disobedience unbelievably sympathetic. And I feel for him. Because obedience is hard. Obedience is hard. It becomes increasingly hard than when obedience seems to be the most crazy, foolish, stupid thing to do, where all eyes are on you and everybody else is saying this is obviously the thing you need to do. Obedience becomes even harder then. Saul is given a choice between acting, which the people are expecting, and sitting and doing nothing, which is exactly what God had commanded him. And that seems foolish. But what happens in Saul, and one of his deep character flaws, is that over and over again you'll see in Saul that public perception of him, what people thought of him, how they viewed him, was infinitely more important to Saul than what God saw. And so Saul finds all these reasons to justify why he did. You don't understand what was happening on the ground. There were things happening that you didn't know about. There was new information came to be. I mean, I got most of it right. People were looking at me. I'm the go-to guy. To too often I'm Saul. I often act on motives that have little to do with obedience, and I rationalize those things away. I'm mostly there in obedience. There's some things that are unique to my circumstance that if God only knew, and I bet you do too. And I say this because we are not that far removed from Saul's struggles. There's 3,000 years between his story and ours, but we look back and the struggles in his heart are the struggles in your heart and my heart. And if you're a good Jewish reader, you're not supposed to just see that. You're supposed to look backwards from Saul back to the beginning of the story to another 7 days where God gave another man a very simple command, and he was unable to do it too. You see, when Israel asked for a new king, they were saying this is a new chapter. God has anointed. When Saul is anointed, that is the image, the word for the Messiah. He is the one that is now to represent, the people say, he is going to represent us to you and you to us. It's a new hope, and it starts with some promise, but what happens? The disobedience of this man cannot follow through, and everything goes bad. And you're supposed to see that the problem of Adam is also Saul's problem. The same blood that pumps through Adam's vein courses through Saul's veins. That Saul is a son of Adam. Give us a king will not solve their problems if the king is as broken and sin-stained as the rest of us. And it should be here in our story, in the biblical story, that we see that we have a need for a king not only to rescue us from our enemies, not only to bring safety and security, but to rescue us from ourselves. We need a king who can take on sin and liberate us from the brokenness in our character and our moral flaws. We need a king who will obey God in all circumstances. On the darkest day, when things on the ground look bad and disaster is right on the doorstep and death is right on the doorstep, we need a king that will obey there. Because every other one has failed. That's the type of king we need. And the story of Saul is supposed to point us and say, well, man, we need a better king than this. But Saul's not that man. His kingdom will not endure because it cannot. Instead, the Lord says, I'm going to give your kingdom to a, quote, man after my own heart. Now that expression, a man after my own heart, if you've been in church, you know that expression, you know that it refers to David. But I did some reading of some theologians and some commentator writers, and they said that expression doesn't just refer to the contents of David's heart. The emphasis of that expression is not how much of God was in David's heart. It's actually how much of David was in God's heart. That of all the men in the world, God put his gaze on this man. Australian theologian John Woodhouse says this. He said, a man after God's own heart means a man of God's own choosing, a man that God has set his heart in. It's talking about the place a man has in the heart of God, rather than just the place God has in a man's heart. And the man at that moment is a mere boy, and his name is David. And it's a good thing God sees something in him, because nobody else sees that in him. In fact, there's a humorous story where God says to Samuel, okay, I want you to go anoint another one. I want you to go to Jesse in Bethlehem and go anoint one of his sons. So Saul goes over, knocks on the door, comes to Jesse's house, like, the Lord has sent me, I'm going to anoint one of your sons. This is a pretty big deal. I need to see your son. So Jesse thinks, well, get my biggest and strongest, and brings him out. And Samuel's like, no. So he brings out his next one, and like, no. And brings out the third one, no. 7 times he does this. And he doesn't bring out any more sons. Samuel's confused and says, is this all you have? And Jesse's like, oh, there's the little one, right? He doesn't even say his name. He says, there's the young one. But he's out tending sheep. What you need to read is like, you don't need to bother yourself with him. You see, God sees something in David that his own father doesn't even see. And Samuel says, get him and bring him in. And when he does, something in Samuel's heart stirs, and Samuel anoints his head with oil, which is the biblical picture of you are now the anointed one that God has chosen. And Josephus, a Jewish historian, tells us that tradition says that when he poured the oil on David's head, he bent him close, and Samuel whispered in David's ear, "You are the next king." I just think of that. I mean, this is Samuel. This is like the heavyweight of the heavyweight in the land has come to you, a mere boy, does this elaborate ceremony which everybody knows the significance of, and says, "You are going to be king." And you know what David does? Right then, he snaps a selfie. And he puts it on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Hashtag so long, Saul. Hashtag the next great one. Hashtag adios sheep. Hashtag come kiss the ring. But he doesn't do that at all. You know what he does after he's just been told that he's going to be king? He goes back out with the sheep. And in that act, tells us everything about this man's character, his loyalty, his sense of responsibility. In fact, it's humorous. Over the next chapters, he's going to be summoned, David's going to be summoned by his dad, and he's going to be summoned by the king. And every time they go looking for him, guess what they have to go look? Out in the fields, because he's out there sleeping with the sheep. Humbly carrying out his responsibility in the same place out on the land where his character was formed, where his courage grew as he learned to trust in God, as he fought off lions and bears with like rocks and slings. The same place where he slept under the stars, staring up at the infinite beauty of the skies. And as a young poet boy, his mind would have gone to praise to the infinite one. That same place is where he goes because that's who he was. He was a shepherd. And that's why God's heart was on him. You see, when Israel asked for a king, it was the ultimate rejection of God. But God is so gracious in our rejection of him. He is so gracious when we devise a plan for our lives that cuts him out. He is so gracious that he grants them their request. He shows them where the request is going to take them, and then he provides an alternative. And as we read the story, you're supposed to read and see the difference between Saul and David, and see that character in your life and my life absolutely matters to what story is written. There's something way bigger you're supposed to see. Because Saul wasn't the king they needed, but guess what? David wasn't the king they needed either. Because the sin-tainted blood of Adam flows through his veins too, which we are going to grievously see. But through this shepherd king, a monarchy was birthed into history. The throne of David was established. And even though David wasn't the king we needed, even though David's son wasn't the king we needed, even though it wasn't his son's son or his son's son's son, in time there would come one who was born in the city of David. Just the right time, he would humbly come to be the king that we needed, the king we didn't even know that we were asking for. That he would come, and like a shepherd, he would gather his wandering sheep, and like a good shepherd, he would lay down his life for his sheep. In him, we will see that we finally find the king that we need, the safety, the security, the identity that we need. And so when the people say, "Give us a king," in my mind's eye, God smiles. And he looks over at his son and he says, "I got just the one." Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for your story written in history. We thank you for the lives and the characters of the people that you use. And that old adage that you can draw a straight line with broken sticks is so true. We see the flaws. We see our flaws so deeply ingrained and person after person after person. And we see that in our demands to get from you what we want, we see that it always goes bad and there's a hopelessness that comes, but we also see that you are a God who is sovereignly even taking our bad choices and weaving that into your story of redemption, your story of grace. And so we thank you for seeing the heart that others can't see. We thank you for David. We thank you for the incredible things we can learn from his life, but we thank you most of all that you establish his throne forever and that you would send us the king that we need to defeat our greatest enemies of sin and death and Satan, not by vanquishing them with an army, not by bloodshed and trample, but by your bloodshed, by your sacrifice. We could never have imagined. But we thank you, God, that through his work we now become your royalty. We become your treasured possession. We become a holy nation. We become a people who've been rescued out of darkness into light to the praise of your glorious name. And we thank you that we actually live in a greater era of grace than even these followers, even these people in the story that we read like David, because they had you with them. We have you in us. That the power that raised Christ from the dead has been unleashed in us, that where Saul said no and David said no, we have the power to say yes. Because of Jesus. God, we thank you that you love us so much. That the plans you have for us for blessing and life are so great that you would even resource us with your Spirit to get there. What a great God. What a God who weaves all of history into your glorious conclusion in Jesus. Would you continue to weave our stories deeper into his? In Jesus' name, amen.